My history with Vinland Saga has been a bit of a roller coaster. From the first 12 episodes, it left me feeling a little lost to what the show was actually going for. However, the following 12 episodes really convinced me that what it was going for was really something really cool and novel and interesting. It basically took me a good 3/4 of the season to get me to that point of being like, okay, I get why this show is so highly regarded. I don't know if that high regard generally follows the show into the second season, so I guess that's what we're here to find out.
The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind.
Okay, so the show is even better now. Golf clap on that. I don't want to clap too hard because it wouldn't much match the energy of the show. It's much lower key, much more introspective, which is what the show felt like it was threatening to be for the first 24 episodes. And now Thorfinn truly is our main character. It's finally his turn. Now, me saying it that way may come across as belligerent, and that's good. I wrote it that way to catch your attention, to make you watch until the end of this next sentence to see if I was really going to be a dick about this, thus scraping away more engagement time from my video. YouTube really is a game of inches and seconds. What my actual point is that in my first couple of videos covering Vinland Saga, I did have the belligerent attitude of looking at the show and wondering why Thorfinn, who certainly should be the main character on paper, wasn't really treated like the main character in actual practice. It never really bothered me per se, but it was definitely a point I wanted to make, and make strongly, because I didn't know what the show was doing, you know? I expected the show to be about Thorfinn from the start, but as I think I put together at some point across those prior videos, it's more about Thorfinn's situation that he's in, and the men around him, and Askeladd as a character in the first season for a reason. And of course, that reason is to frame the rest of the show around Thorfinn after all of season 1 is said and done. End of prologue is a very apt way to put it. The show is basically a brand new animal. It shares characters and themes from the prior season, but the way it goes about exploring them is entirely different. I guess I should reiterate how I do this because I imagine it could get lost in people's heads where the cutoff point is. I'm covering the first 12 episodes because that's what the first/third opening covers. And that leads right up to the point where Leif smuggles Ketil and his sons back to their land on his ship. Seems like Thorfinn and Leif reuniting will be coming up right away, but we haven't quite made it there yet. So this season of this show seems to me will be quite the treat to write about, because it's really just about the characters, and writing about characters is probably my favorite part of these videos that I make. Because really the setup is pretty simple. Both of the characters we spend time with, Thorfinn and Einar, are slaves on this farm, and it's just about their day-to-day lives really. That's most of what the story is. Until we cut away to Canute a couple of times. Outside of that, there isn't really a whole lot going on, but there is a giant amount going on, just not in any kind of X happens, so the result is Y, so then Z occurs kind of formula. It's all about Thorfinn's internal struggles, and those internal struggles are the story. We rejoin Thorfinn, and he's already been a slave for some time. I'm not sure how old he's supposed to be here, still young for sure, maybe his early 20s, but he's already been a slave and is familiar with how it works by the time Einar arrives. Now, you may make the mistake of thinking being a slave has simply broken Thorfinn by the way he acts. Thorfinn has always been a quiet, closed-off guy, but in that self-imposed isolation, there had always been this angry edge to him that signaled to everyone to keep their distance. That edge has disappeared, and what's left is a Thorfinn who seems passive and zombified, no fight left to him at all. And it becomes clear pretty quickly that this isn't because he's been leading the life of a slave, it's because he doesn't have any direction, no goal, or nothing to live for. Thorfinn is a slave now, physically, but that's nothing compared to the mental enslavement he put himself through for his entire childhood. With his goal of killing Askeladd being stolen from him, what is Thorfinn even doing here? Like, being alive. Askeladd being alive and being killable gave Thorfinn's life context, and now that he's gone, there's nothing left for this guy. He even says at one point that he doesn't hate Askeladd, which is an enormous thing for him to admit. I thought the show really got that complex feeling across pretty effectively in the season preceding this, that despite the obvious rage he felt towards the man, a begrudging level of some kind of familiarity at some point took root, no matter how much he probably hated it. I thought that was the sort of thing that Thorfinn would never admit to, and it would only come across subtly in moments here and there, but he's changed so much that he says it openly. So he's left in this middle state of unsuredness, but not just unsuredness, of complete apathy. There's nothing that gives life meaning anymore. He hasn't built anything. He has no applicable everyday skills, no land, no home, no friends, no family. If he wasn't a slave and being given something to do every day and being returned with enough food to barely survive, I don't know what he would do. And neither does he, clearly. He's completely lost. In a strange way, and I know it's a horrible thing to say, he's probably lucky that he ended up a slave. It gave him a chance to maybe come back from all of this. Thorfinn is so broken at the start of the season, he doesn't even know how to feel. Like, he can't complete the action of feeling, let alone what to feel. He wakes up in the morning completely listless, goes through his days, shuffling along and facing his back-breaking labor, and goes to bed sad. Thorfinn asks aloud to some thugs, what is life? Is it simply just being here for the sake of being here tomorrow as well? Do we only live so we don't don't die. The show as a whole, I think, more so asks, what is it to be alive without actually living? Einar is introduced this season to be a companion to Thorfinn, and to be an example of a man who hasn't been broken yet. Einar has found himself in the same situation as Thorfinn, but he still wants, as any man does. When he sees the meager meals he's expected to eat, he wants more. When he sees a beautiful woman, he wants a chance with her. And when he's wronged, he wants things to be righted. He's a slave in this horrible situation, but he's living. Thorfinn is just alive. Only in his dreams does Thorfinn really feel anything, and that feeling is an all-encompassing guilt and dread for the horrible crimes he's committed against innocent people, all in the name of Askeladd, all in the pursuit of killing Askeladd. He's visited by the visage of the old woman that helped him when he was young. He sees his younger self killing Einar and his family, because he may as well have. Who knows how many families he really did slaughter in just this way? Does it really matter that it wasn't exactly Einar's family? Thorfinn's subconscious doesn't seem to think so. In this way, these terrible nightmares are the things that actually bring him closest to human experience. He actually has to interface with them emotionally, though he never remembers them, and obviously it's an extremely harrowing experience each time. No wonder he doesn't want to feel anything if that's all he's capable of feeling. The idea of Thorfinn being ill-equipped to live a normal life, I feel, is at the center of all of this. He spent his entire life learning how to fight and kill, and now those skills aren't qualities he values anymore. If anything, he detests them. He looks at a plow like it's a piece of alien technology. He wonders how anyone could ever think to build such a thing. He thinks to himself that he doesn't know how to fix a roof or how to treat his crops so they grow strong. He, at his core, is not a functioning person of these times. All he was a killing machine, and these feelings come to a head when he has to defend his friend Einar, is knocked out and has a dream of his father. Now, this show is rife with symbolism. There's been multiple times where Thorfinn sees a bird when he feels like he could be free of this torment. The lamb represents innocence and purity, of course, and these animals are the ones that meet Thorfinn as he wakes up in a dream before he's met with his father. These are the things that Thorfinn desperately wishes he could feel, and feels that he is taken away from others. Things that feel like they've been locked away from him forever. Thor's, of course, his gentle father, is shown to be quite literally the shepherd, which of course has some religious connotations, but also he's the one that literally guides the lambs. He's the epitome of what Thorfinn wishes could be his experience. He falls into the chasm of violence and is met with a horrible zombified corpses of warriors, and even people he knew, atop a very similar pillar to the ones they stood near when Askeladd mused about power and the way of the world and life, is Askeladd himself, as snarky and confident as ever. This is where Thorfinn is the most lost. He is teetering on the edge of total despair. He looks down onto the rage-filled bodies hacking away at each other, and I thought this would actually be a great depiction of Valhalla when Thorfinn brought it up. Like, oh, genius, this is showing the exalted afterlife for these people to be what anyone else would view as hell. And I still think it does work that way, and I like to look at it that way too, but Askeladd tells Thorfinn that it's not. What he sees below him is the real world. That's what life is to these people. It's what it was to Thorfinn not all that long ago too. But he has the chance to escape it. A mountain of bodies reach up to him, all of the people that he killed, and Askeladd tells him there's no way to shed their grasp. They will be attached to him forever. That weight will be tied to his soul until the end of time. But that doesn't mean he can't crawl out of this chasm with them on his back. That, Askeladd says, is the true battle. The battle against one's former self, your heinous actions. The battle to live a better life in spite of it all, with all the guilt and shame, finding a way to live a life anyway, not to just be alive. Thor's, like he often is depicted, is shown to be his son's journey personified. In this dream, he flicks back and forth between his shepherd clothing and his armor we see him in briefly at the start of the show. Thor's is also shown briefly to have corpses grasping at him, dragging him down. Thor's was no stranger to violence and wanton bloodshed in his youth, but he found a way to fight and seemingly win Askeladd's true battle. Well, maybe he didn't win. That may be a battle you have to fight for your entire life. But the same war that Thorfinn has to fight in his own mind, his father had to fight as well. Thorfinn finally has this breakdown because he punched someone for the sake of Einar not having to punch him and probably be punished for it. He did it for somebody. The show doesn't highlight that very much, but I do believe that's what it was. It was violence, yes, but it wasn't the same kind of violence. He wakes up from his dream, Einar next to him, and resolves to never commit an act of violence again. He's done with it. In this declaration, I feel like in most shows, that energy would come across as low energy because it's a character resolving to not take action. But in this show, it comes across as high energy, triumphant, because it's something Thorfinn says he's going to do. And that hasn't happened in this season at all. He's only done what he's been told to do. He's not been active at all. But now, with this, he commits himself to doing something, to being something. He was already pretty much practicing it passively, but now it's something to actively pursue. And that is a step upwards for him. His first grueling handhold on the way up and out out of the chasm. What's interesting to me, though, is that I don't think this is the entire lesson for Thorfinn. I think him coming to this conclusion will be very useful for him, but only to a point. This show doesn't shy away from the reality of the world, so I think it would feel pretty hokey if Thorfinn did find a way to solve all of his problems non-violently from now on. I'm sure he will find a way to do it for a while, because, I mean, the story wouldn't really make sense if he didn't, but we know the way of the world as well, and that isn't the way of the world, especially not this world. I don't think the lesson is to be a pacifist entirely, because, of course, think of Thorfinn's own father. Yes, a gentle man in his later years, as we plainly see, but when his hand is forced, it's a hand that will rise to protect what's important to him. He doesn't want to kill, but if things can't be solved with words, then he knows the way of the world as well. I imagine Thorfinn will also have this realization and come to much of the same conclusion, which I think is a very healthy place to come to. That's a big part of what this show is about, what it really is to be a man. It's explored very literally with Olmar when he's told what it is to be a man is to be a killer, and that's not something he can bring himself to be. It's what many of the horrible cretins in this show probably think as well, but don't say so obviously. Thorkel sees being the biggest and strongest as being the most valuable. Askeladd, despite his tragic backstory, still ended up being a morally deplorable, despicable piece of shit until his last day on Earth. Being able to overpower someone else in this time and world is held in a much higher regard than having any level of restraint. And I mean, what can you do to some extent? It's the world they live in as well. This place more often than not sucks and is just inherently violent. So being violent is a defense mechanism as well. But the show really feels like it's leading up to getting across the idea of healthy masculinity in the face of all of this horrible shit that is constantly happening. Thor's was calm and warm and caring, quicker to a smile than any kind of anger, loved his family deeply, and was at his heart a peaceful man. From the little we saw of him, he was kind, but kindness can only ever come from a place of strength. Kindness is goodness expressed through want, not through need or through prospect of gain. You want to do this because you have the means to and you choose to. Thor's had all these admirable qualities of a good man, but he was also a strong man, a man that could stand up for the people around him when it came down to it. Strength isn't an inherently negative trait, but strength being used without any thought is. Violence to oppress and violence to protect, to me, are two fundamentally different things, and while that water can often be muddied and it's never really that clear cut, I do feel like this show is winding up to make a point along those lines. Thor tells Thorfinn that he has no enemies, and I've gathered that that is a famous sentiment from this show, and I'm just not sure if that's landed squarely for me yet. I get the idea that no one in this world, nothing they do to you is worth hurting anyone over, but Thor still gives Thorfinn that dagger. Nothing that's been done to you is worth hurting someone over, because as Thorfinn has tragically learned, that hurt follows you. But Thor still definitely thinks that there's value in not letting those things happen to you or the ones you love in the first place. So while the idea of having no enemies makes sense to me, there's no sense in ruminating things done in the past, it still seems to me that Thor's can be presented with an immediate enemy, and his mindset, through necessity, naturally has to have some leeway. And maybe that's just reality. Maybe that plays perfectly into this idea of healthy masculinity. That yes, be kind and peaceful when you can, live by that mantra, but be strong when you need to be, and put it aside. Maybe it's only one side of the coin. I'm not sure. The show will probably open my mind to more sides of it as it goes on, I figure. The idea that the strongest man of all, the one that Thorfinn looked up to as a child and looks to in his subconscious now more than ever as a guide and shepherd, is the man that rose above the violence of his time and culture, really speaks to what this show is trying to say and what kind of journey is in store for Thorfinn. You're not going to believe it, I have even more to say about Thorfinn, but those thoughts come in comparison to the other characters, so I'm going to talk about the other characters at the same time because they sort of frame Thorfinn just by having interacted with him and the story. Oh, you're going to love it. But anyway, let's split those thoughts away from writing this. I have to assume that was the first half of the video I just did, and talk about the intro. Now, there's a lot to this intro, which is a pretty crazy thing to say considering the closing like 20 seconds is a weird kaleidoscope shot of a ton of things. Looks like I'm watching the music video for Seven Nation Army, and I can't really get much from that part. But before that, it's like, wow, there's a lot. But I could be wrong about literally all of it. It's hard to really be too sure of yourself when it comes to interpreting art, you know? Because with all these visuals, I'm sure the person who storyboarded the whole idea had the themes and visuals they wanted to get across to make you feel a certain way, and had the thought to use these visuals and this music to achieve a certain symbolism in that certain way. So when looking at something like a 90-second music video, I can never really say that my interpretation is correct because I don't bring in the ideas and experiences of the artists behind that music video, and I've never talked to them, so I don't know what they're going for. But I could take a fucking crack at it. But I suppose that is the heart behind artistic interpretation. What a piece of art says to you individually is probably more important than what the actual intent behind it is. All of that word salad basically adds up to, I think there's a ton of symbolism in this opening, and I'm just covering my ass because I bet I'm wrong about all of it. Okay, let's go. We start on what I surmise to be Thorfinn's soul hanging over the ocean. I figure this is his soul because of these shots, and I mean, just kind of weirdly, everyone can sort of agree that someone's soul is this weird orb of blue, fiery energy, right? So it's Thorfinn's soul hanging above the ocean, and the ocean represents death probably, or maybe despair, but probably death, as we see the chain of ghostly arms reaching up and dragging each other down into the depths and breaching the surface, reaching for Thorfinn's soul. We see Thorfinn's dagger fall into the water, representing his former self dying or being gone perhaps, and we see Thorfinn also enter the water, hanging above the black abyss below him. Maybe he feels basically dead already. That dagger fell into the ocean, and with it goes all of his ambition. Everything that drove him to live is gone. All of his momentum for living has left him, despite technically being above the water and being alive. The song's title is The River, which I think plays into this very strongly. I don't ever comment on the lyrics of anime openings because they're usually in Japanese, and I don't speak that language, but this time around it's in English. Wow, what a treat. If the ocean is death, then the river is surely life, because rivers flow into the ocean, like our lives flow into death. The song equates the river to life, the water rushing, stronger, rougher, not being able to hold on, and if you let it sweep you away, it will lead you to the ocean. Thorfinn feels this way. He's on the river. He doesn't feel in control of anything. He's just being pushed through life without any goals or wants towards the ocean and death, where he will be dragged down to hell by all of those that he's wronged. I think this shot is really, really cool. It's simple. We see Thorfinn's more relaxed eyes and his soul within them, and when he blinks, we see his soul is no longer there, with his more angry eyes of his youth. And that's a really cool idea and all, but I really have to say, with just this limited art, I can almost see his entire face change around his eye. You know what I mean? It's really quite something, how much they can get across with only his eye. We get a shot of Canute, who was subtly overtaken by similar red flames to Thorfinn's blue fire, showing their contrast in the men they've become. Thorfinn's cooler looking blue flame showing his melancholy, while Canute's red flames represent his violence and ambition. We then get the kaleidoscope stuff, which I can't really get anything from. It just seems like a bunch of shots from the previous seasons. There's probably stuff in here, but yeah, I don't know, man. The last shot I'm interested in is this shot of Thorfinn shattering the ice with his hoe. I didn't really know what this was getting at, and I still might not, but if the river represents life, the flowing of water and feeling out of control, then perhaps the visual of Thorfinn shattering the ice is him taking some agency back from the river, finding some meaning to his life, as he does in the closing of his story from this run of episodes. The hoe being the instrument to do it is important as well, as it represents a tool to raise a farm with, to build a life with. Kind of pisses me off, honestly. I think this opening is really good with a lot of cool stuff you can think about in it, but then like a quarter of it is eaten up by this stuff, and I'm like, no, I don't care about this. I thought the music was a weird choice right off the bat, but I don't know how many times I'm gonna have to relearn this lesson, but usually the music is chosen to capture the feeling of the episodes therein, it seems, so every time I hear what I think seems like an odd choice for an opening song, I should stop and think, hey, this isn't wrong, it's probably just giving you a hint of the vibe of the show, if anything. Suffice to say, I think the song is an excellent match to the visuals. Good job. I think this has got to be one of the better openings I've seen for the shows I've watched on this channel. If you told my former self, after I had only written that first video on this show, that I would write 4 straight pages about what's going on with Thorfinn's character, he would probably say, wow, that's pretty good. Thank God they actually got around to doing something with him. And my current self would look at him in disgust, like, you clod, you imbecile. They're doing something on purpose, you oaf. Pay attention. Askeladd is the main character of the first season because he's used to frame the next part of the story around Thorfinn. Thorfinn's struggle wouldn't be as enthralling now if we didn't follow Askeladd as much as we did. We wouldn't be able to appreciate the life Thorfinn led if we didn't see all sides of it, and a lot of that was from Askeladd's point of view. And we wouldn't have been able to grasp Thorfinn's weird, complex relationship that got him to the place of being able to say he didn't hate him out loud. Askeladd was his own character, but he was also deeply planted utility for future Thorfinn shit. Nearly every character you spend a lot of time with in this show is someone to frame Thorfinn's struggles through. Askeladd went through a similar, while also dissimilar, origin story to Thorfinn, and he found a way to come out the other side of it as a strong but horrible man. As he puts it in Thorfinn's dream, not many people get the chance to climb out of the pit of violence violence, and Askeladd was surely not one of the lucky few. If Thorfinn did end up killing Askeladd, could Thorfinn have ended up a lot like him? It's easy to assume no, since we see how Thorfinn feels now, but that would be a big split in the timeline. Who knows how that would affect a person? Einar, like I mentioned, is a Thorfinn who, much like Thorfinn, had his family ripped away from him, but didn't have any single person to center his hate around. And while he did lose his father at a similar age, he had the rest of his family to lean on and love as he grew into adulthood. Einar is an interesting character in his own right, but he makes Thorfinn's story so much more interesting just for being near him. Once he learns that Thorfinn spent most of his life to this point as a Norse raider and killer, he can't help but think of Thorfinn as exactly that, and of course that means he hates him. But he has the mental strength and capacity to realize that it wasn't exactly Thorfinn who did it. No matter how much he represents his trauma in his head at that moment, he knows it wasn't really him. And because of that, he chooses not to kill him for it. Much in line with Thor's own thinking, he realizes that Thorfinn is not his enemy in that moment. It also probably helps that the dude is having horrible screaming nightmares, so it's clear the guy is mentally suffering, so that probably helps in the whole, alright, I'm not gonna kill you, I guess thing. Einar, like Askeladd, also represents, to me, a life that Thorfinn could have had, and luckily for Thorfinn this time around, a life that he possibly could still have, if he takes the right steps. I should mention Ketil, I guess. He's a pretty big character in this season, and like, fuck, man, I should not be thinking like, he seems like an alright guy, but like, fuck, they write him to be like a pretty nice and agreeable dude. Like, what do you want from me? Obviously, I condemn him for being a slave owner and being weak and blind to the conditions his workers actually have to live in, but no, actually, as I voice this, fuck that. That probably makes it even more insidious. He's a slave owner that comes across as a pretty nice guy, which is like already a contradiction, you know. But then he acts like this nice kind of guy and is incapable of punishment or violence himself, while he makes the people under his watch live in such horrible ways and be abused by the men under his command, or welcomes his muscle to keep the farm safe. I think I have to exercise some critical thinking here from what the show has given me. Like, sure, he comes across as a guy you might like to have a drink with, seems friendly, but he also is a slave owner that overworks his people, keeps a sex slave, doesn't protect the men he owns when it comes down to it, and he himself feels incapable of getting his hands dirty and lies about being a big, strong warrior in the past. Yeah, never mind. Actually, fuck this guy. This guy actually does suck. I think he's more of a story utility more than any other character. He's the guy that owns the slave farm, but even his beat of talking himself up like a legendary killer plays into the whole thing. All of the messaging, I mean. This is the world. It's better to be feared than loved. If you have a reputation as an impossibly strong berserker, walking slaughterhouse, life is probably going to be easier for you. What it is to be a man to all these people is exactly what that lie is, so it's a good lie to tell if you want to live a long life in peace. His two sons, Thorgil and Olmar, represent the two sides of this horrible world perfectly. Thorgil is an impossibly strong marauder who can kill anyone who dares stand in his way, and takes pride and satisfaction in turning men into corpses. Violence is reason to him. Violence is the way of the world, and the world makes sense to him. He is the man that represents that world the most clearly in Thorfinn's immediate orbit. Olmar is the horribly misguided youth that wants to be all the things he thinks his father was and knows his brother is, but he just doesn't have the guts for it. He wants to be the man that Thorfinn used to be, but in a strange way, he's both blessed and cursed for not having the talent or stomach for it. Blessed because he won't be thrown into the chasm of violence, and he probably won't have to learn all the terribly harsh lessons that Thorfinn had to learn. Cursed because he will be looked down upon by this culture for not being strong, for being unable to hold himself to the standard of manhood that they've all come to accept. Every important character in this story all circle this central idea of what it is to be a man, and to be a man and live a prosperous life. And none of them have the right answer. Thor's is the epitome of the correct answer to that question. Einar is probably the closest to getting it right, but even he doesn't have the full formula. He's in this situation now because he wasn't strong. He couldn't protect his family or himself, despite being the closest to actual happiness. He isn't what the show would tell you it is to be an actually proper man. Because no matter how much the show seems to abhor violence, as we've discussed, the show also tells you there is a need to be strong. All of this, I hope, comes across on my words as very interesting to me. That's all the show really needs to do to keep me invested. Like I said, in these episodes, the story isn't really much of anything. It's just these dudes working on a farm and clearing land, but it's these themes and these ideas that really drive what the show was trying to say that I think is great. I even put in my notes a couple of times that I thought it felt kind of slice of lifey for a couple of episodes in there. And you would think that would feel really slow for a show like this, but it never does because every scene feels important important to what Thorfinn is learning and what he's went through and is currently going through. This brings us all the way around to our probably deuteragonist, though he gets so much less screen time so far in this season, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable really titling him as such, Canute. In this story of parallels and opposites, Canute is the opposite to Thorfinn, and parallel as well. Canute has changed from this passive little weakling to this power-hungry murderer. He has had the exact opposite journey to Thorfinn in just about every single way. He is the violent king of two nations. Thorfinn is the passive slave of a farm owner. And I know Canute was already on his way to becoming king, but it's still pretty crazy that based on their characters, the adjectives violent and passive are the two most surprising things. Canute is so far gone that his happy flashbacks to his childhood are actually colored to be horrific rather than calming or charming, because he actively poisons and kills his brother despite their great relationship when they were young. And the show tells us that they had a good relationship even into their adulthoods. Canute had power and a kingdom of his own to rule, but he still killed his brother that he loved. He actively kills his family. They hold no value to him. Thorfinn went on this entire horrific journey purely because his family was taken from him. And as the decapitated head of his father tells him, killing his brother in cold blood brings the world no closer to the paradise he envisioned in his youth. Canute isn't killing in the name of some far-off goal anymore. He's killing for power and greed and for security. There are no high moral walls to hide behind anymore. Canute has blasted past what the society and culture think it is to be a man and has become monstrous in his actions. I would imagine you would describe any other character in just about any other show as haunted if they kept seeing the visage of their father's decapitated head come and tear into them for being a horrible person and thus an average king. But Canute sees his father's head and he's just like, oh, it's you again. Yeah, what's up, dickhead? You cannot describe him as haunted because he's not haunted by it. I guess you could call him psychotic, that would work. But the kind of man he's grown to be, he's not even put off by seeing such a thing. Canute represents everything that is evil in the world they live in, filtered through the ever-present idea of manhood and given wide-reaching and actionable power. Canute, despite where he started, has become everything that is wrong with this world, and only threatens to become even more contemptible and dug even further into the chasm of violence, while Thorfinn finally might have the mindset and surroundings to start dragging himself out of it. I look back on this script, coming to the end of it, and I find it pretty crazy that I was able to write about 8 full pages of words about basically just the characters in this show. And that's when I edited it down and tried to make a fucking YouTube video out of it. It was probably closer to 10 or 12 before I took the axe to it. It seems the show is really winding up to get into some stuff now, like things are actually going to happen. But for this half, it was really just exploring its characters and themes and just feelings in the world. Even the seasons fit with Thorfinn's arc. In his lowest moment, it looks like the start of winter. But in the next episode, when he finally has a lens to look at life through and see it being a bit brighter, their work is done and it feels like it's summer. It's possible for there to be light in this world. Just every little thing, every character, every little scene in the show all comes back around to what Thorfinn is going through and why he can't fit into this world anymore and why he has to struggle to be a better man despite the world he's in. Everything is so tightly written around its central themes and so interesting in the way it explores them. I honestly don't care that much that not much happened in the traditional sense because so much happened in a non-traditional sense. I already thought the show was good, but these 12 episodes have only made it better. I'm excited to see where the show goes when things finally have to get mixed up, like things are seeming they're gonna have to be in short order here. Patreon shoutouts. If you want to see a brand new video from me ahead of the YouTube release, you can support me on Patreon for just a few bucks. Link, as always, is in the description below the video. Biggest shoutouts of all, one of my top patrons, Blanco, who is immune to damage from anything you'd find in your average kitchen. They call him Kitchen Invincible. Liquor Cause I Know Her, who borrowed money from an actual shark. Turns out you don't have to pay back real loan sharks as long as you don't go to the beach. Potato Scream, who I watched saw through an active beehive with their teeth. They love honey that much. The Former Meaning of Life, who was working on building the world's new tallest mountain. They could use some help right next to the old tallest one, actually. Bring a shovel. The 1AM Party, who I saw code an entire video game once by simply putting 2 discs into his GameCube at once. I really want to play Monkey Ball Hit and Run again someday. And Whitrow, who was so suave they actually got surgery to be shorter to try and make the dating game harder. Didn't work though, it's still effortless. And of course my other fuck you money patrons, a flock of plain cakes, A2AX Phoenix, Anthony Collins, Insomniate, Kevin Barlin, Creffin, Midnight Balzoms, and Tater of Tots. And my god overanalyzers, 2 Boots Are Beat, Ang, Andrew Watford, Angle 4.2, Blade Dancer, Carlo Wren, Cosmic Newbie, Danny Stevens, Dr. Xerox, Dominic Saint, Dragon Beam 44, Aaron Grace, Jackson, Jeremy Rubenstein, John Warhammer, Kirill Magnus, Matt, Marshall Rather, Michael Fellon, Mitchell Gobrecht, Nick, Nicholas Abbott, Peter Bayron, Philip Gindra, Rockin' Mist, Ryan Maxwell, Scoobert, Shane Antonacci, Princess Useless Backwards, That Blind Ginger, and some sort of bare face, comma, I don't know. Next up, maybe something a little more Western, maybe fucking around a little bit.